Moving on, good evening and welcome again to the July 12 meeting of Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkeman. Trustee Brienne.
Here.
Trustee Fisher.
Here.
Trustee Markey.
Here.
Trustee Rappin.
Here.
Trustee Ryder.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the consideration for the minutes of June 28, 2021 Village Meeting, Board of Meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any changes, any comments? Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next are our non-agenda items and visitors. The village president and board of trustee allocates 15 minutes during these items for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the village board of trustees on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the village board of trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Anybody online? Thank you. Let's move on. Any changes on the order of the meeting? No. Next is our village finance report. The summary of background and reason for request: expenditure of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $327,818.78 for the period of June 29 to July 12, 2021. Expenditures of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $309,471.59 for May 2021, for total expenditures of $637,290.37. You will find the report and document attached. The warrant report for June 29 to July 12, 2021 for $327,818.78. The invoice register report shows check with a status of open or paid. All checks with a status of open are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval. Checks with a status of paid are checks processed manually. And you will find our payroll report as well.
You don't move that, not yet.
Are there any questions? Or should I call
You
motion
move
first? So is there a motion to approve a warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? So hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 7, or next, we have a village administrator report.
I have no report tonight.
Next is our village attorney's report. Mr. Friedman?
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Next is the village president's report. In the agenda, you will find the appointment of Mrs. Hans Sorensen. Unfortunately, we're missing a couple elements, and I will delay this appointment tonight. Okay, any questions? Thank you. Next is our acceptance of the correspondence. Please note the correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational reports on June 25 and July 2nd, 2021. Is there a motion to accept the correspondence?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussions? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. Anyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Thank you. Next is item 11, an ordinance amending Title 7 of the Municipal Code to regulate small wireless facilities. Is there a motion to approve a resolution?
Ordinance.
The ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act, SWF Act, which became effective on June 1st, 2018, significantly restricts the ability of municipalities to regulate the installation and operation of small wireless facilities by wireless service providers such as AT&T and Verizon, and by installers of SWFs. In July 2018 and April 2019, and pursuant to the SWF Act, the village adopted local fees, regulation, design guidelines, and a model pole licensing agreement that apply to proposed small wireless facilities. These measures are a direct extension of a village policy to minimize the potential adverse impacts of monopoles and cellular facilities to the extent that these goals can be realized within the framework of the SWF Act. During the last legislative session, the General Assembly passed Public Act 102-0009, which makes a number of adjustments to the SWF Act. The attached ordinance simply conforms the village regulations to match. Specifically, it adds a required certification by a radio engineer when adding or modifying small wireless facilities, and increases the minimum separation between an existing utility pole and a proposed new utility pole to 200 feet from 100 feet. The village is also reviewing its adopted design guidelines for small wireless facilities, and minor updates to these guidelines may be presented to the board for consideration concurrent with second reading of this ordinance. There are no small wireless facilities yet located within the village, and the village is not aware of any pending plans or proposals to construct such facilities. Any questions?
I have a question, although you look like you were going to go.
Go ahead, go
All right.
You too.
So this legislation has been out for a while. This only makes it a little bit more stringent to our advantage ultimately. I guess what I would ask you, Drew, I know that there's no plans in this community to have any of this equipment, but have you heard of any other North Shore communities where this has happened, where there's been, unhappiness or any contention, or this just is rarely used?
Well, it's being rolled out slowly by the various providers, and it's kind of been from the city north, kind of edging forward. I don't know, Peter, are you with any of your clients been dealing with that?
It has been slow, but it has not stopped. I mean, I know AT&T's doing it.
Verizon came to the village and talked about wanting to negotiate an overall agreement to come, and they were doing that in kind of smaller communities on the fringe, and and they had hired a consultant to help them do that, but they've never come out and pulled the trigger in building those. I've heard a mixed kind of bag. I think there were some complaints out of Evanston, if I remember correctly, if there were some of those, but it's just been really, slower than we anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, the hope would be that if they are allowed to do this on public ways, that it's not in downtown Lake Bluff, that they're being discreet in their choices of where this equipment goes, but we don't control
We'll
that.
see, right, yeah, I mean, that's the rub with this, is that, that from federal government down, it became very clear that there was gonna be a big push for this type of technology and limited our ability to control it.
I remember the discussion when it occurred, and that was with Verizon, and I believe the only point of contention we could offer was appearance. we knew that these devices were going to come on utility poles, and the only choice we had was how would these appear to our community? Has there been any changes in the last 2 years?
No, I haven't seen any change in the type of infrastructure they've been I think fortunately, if anything, I think it's been getting smaller, what I've seen, the type, but it's still, it's not quite like, I will call them, we joke and call them internally, like the deer stands that you see in certain areas that is like, is that a cooler with a deer stand on certain utility poles? And you wonder why they're there, and it's, but it seems like it's getting smaller, but I think the good news, I'd like to think the good news is the longer they wait, the smaller infrastructure will be, just because of the technology. Time is our friend in this regard.
Well, isn't that the irony, is that the small doesn't refer to the physical item, but to the
Yes. Yeah.
technology? But based on what I'm looking at now, there are some that are attached to physical light poles, that we don't have, that are, look like canisters as opposed to a deer blind.
Yeah, I think our standards, the part of the village's approvals a few years back did include what our standard would be, and it's limiting in what they can put on those types of poles, and we don't have a lot of those, I'll call it like classic COBRA standards that you see in other communities where they could have the structural integrity to support that type of infrastructure, which could be good news and bad news. It means more poles, right? So we're waiting to see what gets rolled out.
Got it. And this, I take, is part and parcel of 5G.
Yes.
Any more questions?
My question had to do with timing, so Steve kind of asked most of it, but I also had a question of if we have any jurisdiction over the number of structures that that they put up in our town. Is it based on, size of the town, like actual square footage of the town? Is it based on, is there anything that it's based on, or can someone just roll through here and put in as many as they want?
With the limitations of proximity
Proximity
between.
of time.
Right.
And again,
location.
very early on, they had talked about, good news, bad news, the density of Lake Bluff doesn't make sense for them to invest in this area, right? And so it's good news for the visual aesthetic of the community, bad news because there's customers that want this technology, right? They want that added bonus of the 5G. But what we heard very early on was that they were going to go on, think of very busy corridors, like the 41, the 176, where people are driving and people are needing that technology or wanting that technology in those areas where there's large numbers of people. And Lake Bluff is just not that densely populated that you would think we would be one of those last areas to get a rollout.
So it may be more likely to be in the business park on that
Waukegan,
infrastructure on
176.
Waukegan 176 than it would be, say, at, Prospect and
Yeah,
Maple.
generally east of Green Bay Road, right,
Okay.
yeah. But then again, going back years ago, AT&T was going to roll out their new technology, and they only went so far in terms of their build out. It's interesting and somewhat confusing to see what gets built and what doesn't over time.
Well, and, there's so much obsolescence so quickly
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that really is the issue, is how long will this remain the technology, and then we'll have to go, through this again, not long at the pace that they're going, I trust.
Some communities are disguising those telephone poles as trees, by the way.
And they've been doing that for monopole cell towers for years, right?
Oh, right.
So, any more questions? No? So this is a voice vote again. Anyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So this ordinance passes.
You'll see at the next meeting for second reading.
Next is a public hearing to consider awarding a franchise for the collection of waste from non-residential locations and any proposed franchise fees. And this is a public hearing. As directed by the village board in November and consistent with state law, staff is concluding a competitive request for proposals process to award the village exclusive residential and commercial solid waste hauling franchises to a private firm. State statute requires that in order to award the village first commercial franchise, and I quote, After issuing a request for proposal, the municipality may not award a franchise without first, one, allowing at least 30 days for proposals to be submitted to the municipality, two, holding at least one public hearing after the receipt of proposals on whether to award a franchise to a proposed franchisee, and three, providing at least 30 days public notice of a hearing. At the public hearing, the municipality must disclose and discuss the proposed franchise fee or calculation formula of such franchise fee that it will receive under the proposed franchise. Accordingly, staff provided 30 days advance notice of a public hearing scheduled for Monday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. to satisfy requirement 2 and 3 listed above, since its March 22nd, 2021 meeting, and most recently at its June 28th, 2021 meeting, the village board has continued the public hearing. The Village Evaluation Subcommittee and staff continues to negotiate with proposers and accordingly are not yet ready to recommend award of a commercial franchise. Accordingly, staff recommends the village resume the public hearing, accepts any comments, and continue the hearing at the village board next meeting on Monday, July 26, 2021 at 7 p.m.
So you open the public hearing, and if there's any comments?
So this public hearing is open. Any comments?
You can finally conclude it tonight.
All right, so I declare that this hearing closed. Next is an ordinance revising licensee regulations for scavengers, the village's municipal waste regulations, and the village comprehensive fee ordinance. Is there a motion to approve a resolution,
The ordinance.
this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. As directed by the village board in November and consistent with state law, staff has concluded a competitive request for proposals process to award the village exclusive residential and commercial solid waste hauling franchises to a private firm, as this is the village's first award of an exclusive commercial franchise. Various revisions to the village code are necessary to implement the franchise. With a recommended award on Monday night's village board agenda, staff recommends second final consideration of this ordinance now so that it can be adopted concurrent with award of both franchises. The attached ordinance is a comprehensive rewrite of Title III, Chapter 4, Scavenger Licensing, and Title IV, Chapter 2, Solid Waste and Recyclable Material Collection of a Municipal Code that incorporates best practices from other communities. Highlights of the proposed changes include scavenger licensing. Number one, the application process is modernized and reflects contemporary requirements, such as providing minimum level of insurance and a hold harmless declaration in favor of a village. Number two, the village administrator, rather than the village board, would approve licenses consistent with other types of business licenses under the village code. Number three, reporting requirements for haulers are updated now that these reports are not tied to the village statutory ability to award a commercial franchise. Next is municipal waste regulation. Number one, section 4-2-2 J provides the process by which a business may seek to be exempted from the commercial franchise so that they may retain the hauler of their choice. Other communities with commercial franchises provide similar provisions which are lightly used. Number two, in addition to preserving the village existing solid waste requirements, such as covered containers, time-vat containers, maybe adverse street, and so on, in section 4-2-3 and 4-2-4. Section 4-2-5 creates stronger local prohibitions against dumping, burning, burying, and unlawful disposal of hazardous material. Number 3, Section 4-2-6 provides a process for village administrator to use the village statutory authority to remove unlawful accumulations of waste at an owner's expense. Then number 1, site plan fees for new waste enclosures necessary to use the village new free commercial recycling offerings would be waived through April 30, 2023 as an incentive to expand enclosures to allow for new recycling containers. This is a first reading of this ordinance took place on March 8, 2021.
So this would be for second and final approval.
And any questions? And this is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is item number 14, a resolution approving a contract with Groot Industry, Inc. for the collection of recyclable materials, solid waste, and organic waste from residential customers. The village solicited proposals in January for the collection of recyclable, solid waste, and landscape food scrap waste for all single-family and certain multifamily dwellings in the village. 4 bids plus 1 alternative were submitted to the village by the February 10th deadline. An evaluation committee, called the committee, consisting of Finance Committee Chair Barbara Ankenman, SEC Co-Chair Brian Renner, Superintendent of Public Works Jack Terlap, Village Administrator Drew Irvin, and SWALCO Executive Director Walter Willis, reviewed all of the proposals. Utilizing the criteria outlined in the RFP, negotiations and discussions were conducted to best meet the objective of a village. Based on these conversations with the proposers, it was the unanimous recommendation of the committee to finalize negotiations with Groot Industries, Inc. Groot's proposal demonstrated their professional qualifications, experience, and exceptional past performance, providing HHW services with community like and including Lake Bluff, an operational approach that aligns with the village sustainability goals, including reducing their overall carbon footprint. Groot will redirect an equivalent amount of waste to Lake County landfills rather than utilizing their Winnebago County facility, and prioritizes use of their CNG fleet for all 5 years of the contract. The continuation of a year-round food scrap ride-along program, modified pay-as-you-throw limited collection, and à la carte options.
Nailed it.
I had to say that. English is so hard sometimes.
Try to work that in every cover memo.
You should.
Make fun. I had to say that.
True, that was bad.
Competitive pricing, which will, let's get serious. Competitive pricing, which will result in an initial reduction in the base monthly rate from $18.45 to $17.95 per household, with a 2.5% annual escalator, and compliance with scope of services, which includes year-round yard waste collection, semi-annual bulk pickup, e-waste collection at curb, and the PW and recycling center facility, in addition to standard curbside collection. If approved, this agreement will commence on April 1st, 2022, and end on March 31st, 2027. SEC Co-Chair Brian Renner, SWALCO Executive Director Walter Willis, and village staff will be in attendance at the meeting to respond to any questions.
We also have Groot Representative Josh Molnar, who's here as well.
Any questions?
I was just wondering if we currently have e-waste collection at the curb? I
You
don't-
do.
We do. It's good to know. All right, I didn't know if that was something new.
No, and actually, and I would say, just generally, there are a handful of very, very minor language changes that we've been working through with Groot over the last several days to try to get to this finish line tonight. And as, for example, regarding electronic collection, there's language in the draft agreement in front of you that reads, residential customers must prearrange any collection of electronic items with contractor by telephone no later than 5 p.m. the day prior to collection. Working with Groot, that's difficult for them to program because at 5 o'clock, all their crews are gone home, right? So people walk in, get in the trucks, and go out the next morning. So they've asked for noon the day before. So we think that's reasonable. We're going to make that change. And there's a couple other little ones. We don't need to know what their insurance deductibles are. There's things like that we're going to work through. So if it's okay, if this is ultimately approved, I would ask that you would allow the village attorney and myself to finalize these little changes like that with Groot. I think there's a couple Scrivener errors in there too, and some dates and so forth. So. Mr. Willis, I don't know if you have anything to add. I mean, I know you love to brag about Lake Bluff as your number one Swalco star.
Swalco.
I'm ashamed I've even asked you to do it, so.
Well, good evening, Village President and trustees, Walter Willis. And this is one of my favorite parts of my job is helping the members go out to bid. And in this case, you guys got some of the lowest pricing for 3 carts. When I mean that, your refuse, your recycling, and your yard waste food scraps year-round in the entire state. I can't think of anyone. Deerfield's at 18. You guys are a smidge below. So I think this is a good fruits of the labor here for the RFP process. And I'll speak later on if you want on the commercial, but really good RFP. I think you guys, you got a good hauler here, and working with Glenn and the staff. Pretty proud of what we did there, so.
I do have a couple questions.
Yep.
Regarding the food scraps, sorry.
Yeah.
to cut you off, but I was just looking at the way in which they're to be disposed of, and just so happens, my daughter and husband were at the market, farmer's market the other day, and there was a discussion, a great deal of concern about the need for paper bags to be how they were disposed of. But I'm looking at this and see that they could also use a plastic can of a capacity not to exceed 32 gallons. I'm wondering if we're making that known, because I think there's been a lot of, in my experience, question about whether the food scraps must be in those bags that we put our lawn waste in, which are very, very big, or if they can be put in a tub of some sort. I have a pail myself, but, and just set on top of the canister, regular canister.
Well, I might have to defer to Josh on the 5-gallon pail, but as far as the liners and using your own can, that's been the program in Lake
That's
Bluff.
what I
You don't get the
You
third
can
cart.
do that. You
Okay.
can.
You can rent one?
That's the current contract. You can rent a cart, but people have labeled food scraps, and they will pick them up and turn them as they would outside of a brown paper
Apparently,
bag.
that's not well known.
Well, so we have put out at various stages, through various communication pieces, that information. And when the new contract goes in place, we'll put out another mass mailing.
Awesome, let's do
So
that.
that's in there, and we've done that before, but it's just, there's turnover, people don't know. And
It was apparently revolutionary when Todd talked about his
Well,
bucket.
the other thing, Drew, I don't know if your board's aware, but we did get a USDA grant, and we've hired a marketing expert, and we're pushing content out through Lake Bluff and a couple other towns specific to this topic. And we're trying to touch people every month with it. And you guys are kind of our pilots we have over 30 towns that can commingle their yard waste during the 8-month season. You're one of the 5 towns that has it year round. And Deerfield's been very successful in their communications effort. And I think we want to work with Lake Bluff and really push it, along with the USDA marketing expert we have, along with Groot's help, to really get the word out and get people energized about it.
I think there's opportunity for advertising on
Always,
this and other.
and it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's constant.
Mr. Willis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions? This is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is number 15, a resolution approving a contract with Groot Industries, Inc. for the collection of recyclable materials, solid waste, and organic waste from commercial customers. In an effort to save local businesses money and increase recycling, the village has taken all the necessary steps to expand Lake Bluff's recycling culture into the commercial arena. This process began over 6 years ago with a 3-year study of commercial recycling that found only 28% of our business's community recycles. This study was followed by a survey of commercial businesses to ascertain market pricing and service needs. In other municipalities that have instituted a commercial franchise, they have found that local businesses saved money or were not harmed, and recycling increased. For the first time in the village's history, proposals were solicited in January for the collection of recyclable, solid waste, and organic waste for all commercial and certain multi-family dwellings in the village. By the February 10th deadline, 4 bids plus 1 alternative were submitted to the village. An evaluation committee, the committee consisting of Finance Committee Chair Barbara Ankenman, SEC Co-Chair Brian Renner, Superintendent of the Public Works Jack Terlap, Village Administrator Drew Irvin, and Swalco Executive Director Walter Willis, reviewed all of the proposals. Utilizing the criteria outlined in the RFP, negotiations and discussions were conducted to best meet the objective of the village. Based on these conversations with the proposers, it was the unanimous recommendation of the committee to finalize negotiations with Groot Industries, Inc. Groot's proposals demonstrated their professional qualifications, experience, and exceptional past performance providing waste management services, an operational approach that aligns with the village sustainability goals, including reducing their overall carbon footprint. Groot will redirect an equivalent amount of waste to Lake County landfills rather than utilizing their Winnebago County facility, and prioritizes use of their CNG fleet for all 5 years of the contract, and competitive pricing, which will be the lowest commercially franchised rate in the state, 2.5 annual escalator. If approved, this agreement will commence July 13, 2021, conclude March 31st, 2027, and involve a transition period to end no earlier than October 12, 2022, 15 months following the board approval. SEC Co-Chair Brian Renner, Swalco Executive Director Walter Willis, and village staff will be in attendance at the meeting to respond to any questions. Do we have questions?
Having been on the school board for 8 years, I'm curious as to whether this can or will cover the schools and/or the park district.
It has that, Glenn, can you come up? So Glenn and Brian, you can both come up, that'd be great. So I guess what I'd hoped to do is thank Brian. Brian, please. So Brian is, as a former village trustee, has got involved with this years ago and has continued to answer the call when we've asked for somebody to be involved in negotiations and helping the village guide its waste management priorities. So thank you for that, Brian, appreciate that. And I didn't list Glenn, but Glenn was key in producing the RFP documents and putting those out and putting the bid package together, working with Stuart Weiss from Peter's firm, whose specialties include marijuana and trash, apparently. But anyway, Glenn, you've had conversations with the school about, I think, some early conversations about their availability or propensity to get involved with us on this.
Sure. So ultimately, many different entities in the village have a choice under the ordinance you approved earlier tonight. So there does exist a pathway to provide certain entities with exceptions to this exclusive franchise. Schools are very commonly given one in other communities, but they would also have the opportunity to join the pricing we've received. I haven't compared their current pricing to this pricing, but in most of the comparisons we've done, it's very competitive.
So when we refer to commercial, as we just did several places, we're including
Institutional.
institutional? Okay.
Commercial is really anything that's not in our
Not
residential
residential,
contract.
okay.
Yeah.
That's how I read it. I just wanted to be certain.
And I'm sorry, I asked Glenn, I thought you had a conversation specifically with your business manager. You were playing phone tag with him,
Yeah.
right?
All right, yeah, early on, we had some conversation with Jay Con. I haven't had anything since this
Oh, okay.
pricing came out.
I'm sure he will do what is
Most economic.
economic. And I know the PTO has long done food scrap composting, so I got to figure this is going to be really key for them. Make it a little bit easier, maybe a lot easier.
Drew, did we get any feedback on why only 28% of the businesses were recycling? Why the number's not higher?
You know, part of it is just limited space for where, there's garbage corrals that limit how many, containers they can have to utilize. That's been a big part of it, and that's one of the things, and as part of this overall approach is giving businesses a chance to come in and get garbage corrals approved through a process and waivers of fees and through that, so they can have those bigger corrals if they choose to add on for this space. And I'm sure it's always cost. I mean, that's kind of what we hear. And Walter, you may have more insight than I do about that, why businesses have not historically, or why, when we've done these surveys over time, these 3-year studies, why is recycling typically not at 50% or greater?
25%, we've done, I think, 5 or 6 of these 3-year studies, and only one town has gone beyond that. So you're right in where the normal is, and the nice thing about this contract is 4 cubic yard container and smaller, 1 time a week, is no additional cost for recycling. So the cost argument, I'm not recycling because I can't afford it, is no longer there. It's embedded in your refuse cost. It's not free. Josh, make sure I'll make that point. It's not free to have recycling service, but it is in this contract. So that will go away. And most of the time, most of the towns, there's 7 towns, you'll be the 8th one with the commercial franchise. They've all loved them. Most of them are above 50%. The highest is Highland Park with 70%
Wow.
participation rate. So there's your goal.
And how long have they had a commercial franchise?
Oh boy, 12, 15 years, quite a while.
But
Right when
they
I
started,
began.
were they around a third as well?
Yeah. You're right where the number is.
Is it compulsory?
No.
Okay. I didn't know if it, I mean, I'm sure it is in certain municipalities around the country, but I wondered if that, because if you design a business and you lay out something and you only accommodate for garbage because you don't have to recycle, I'm just wondering how anybody would retrofit a space. I have a specific place in mind, but if you're just backing in a garbage truck to pick something up and you've only given allotted space enough for garbage, I'm just wondering what accommodations we're willing to make for people who may need to, those
You go to the corral.
involve variances that we wouldn't otherwise grant. Because this is something we want to encourage.
Yes, and they-
Definitely want to get that number higher.
They can work with Groot and Josh to maybe share containers. Keep in mind, there's food scrap in this contract too, so that's something that we'll be going to the restaurants with. And space is an issue, without a doubt, but creativity can solve a lot of problems. So.
So this is good for the village to have everybody using one service, so we don't have different trucks from different companies running around. But my understanding is the commercial, businesses in our community will be compelled to utilize your firm here, and there's a 12-month transition to do that. And the majority of people are going to be winners in this. You've got great pricing, but there'll be a handful of losers. So of those folks who have had, for whatever reason, very low pricing on their pickup, have you seen any communities try and make it more equitable for them during a transition period, or it's kind of like, the greater good?
Yeah, we brought the 1-year price freeze into your contract. So if they're below the pricing that Groot, I'm not with Groot, but
okay, yeah.
with Swalco, but that's fine. Then they get their price froze for a year. So we've seen in Highland Park and all these towns that had that contract provision, we go to them and say, well, how many businesses got that 1-year freeze? It's less than 5%. So I can say with great confidence that 90% or more of your businesses are going to save 20 to 30%. You're going to have fewer trucks on your road. Groot's going to be in and out more efficiently in your town here. And like I said, everybody that's done the commercial franchise There's a little pushback from the business community, some of them, but that's why we reached out to them. We've been out there surveying them, talking to them. This has been a 5-year process, so, to Glenn and to Drew and everyone, you stuck it out, and you're gonna see a good thing for your business community.
Yeah, and Drew, you haven't had anybody in particular reach out to you and say, no way?
No.
Okay.
No,
5 years is a long time.
It goes through, it goes from the study, and I go to Chamber of Commerce meetings and say, hey, we're doing this study, everybody, we've announced it at every Chamber of Commerce I've spoken at for the last 6 years. This is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and everyone's like, oh, sounds good. But, when we surveyed trying to get actual contracts for their waste haulers, and, we had a very minimum response.
Your return rate was lower than most, but it still told us the story that there's some bills out there.
Most will save, and some substantially.
3 or 4 times what your rates are gonna be if you approve it, so.
Cool.
I just wanted to say really quickly, sorry, Regis.
Go ahead.
It sounds like a tremendous amount of time and energy was spent putting this together, so I wanted to thank everybody who was involved, the village, Swalco, Groot, Brian, Glenn, thank you, I really appreciate it.
And I will say that again. Thank you, Glenn, and the village staff, and SEC co-chair Brian Renner for, and I quote, the lowest commercially franchise rate in the state. Thank you so much.
You did it.
Thanks.
I did it the first time, too.
Come on back.
I was
And
on
that was
the board,
the
I was on
first,
the board for the
right.
first contract.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, this is great. Thank you very much. Any more questions?
Just an observation that we have a real opportunity here that to really go out with branding, marketing on Lake Bluff as a community of choice for people, for the food scrap program, for the recycling, for the commercial recycling availability now, and hopefully increased commercial recycling. And I talked to Drew a little bit about the availability of recycling containers in the CBD. We have a lot more we could do there. I know that was the last contract, not this one. But I just want to see us really leverage this to communicate what we find important, because we clearly do find it important. We've spent 5 years negotiating a contract. And to not have those outward appearances of it is a real missed opportunity. So more recycling containers, temporary recycling containers during Bluffinia, anything to get people to know that that matters to us, and to get people recycling.
So you're raising a very important point. So Glenn, in terms of plan, what will follow this agreement? Are we going to have communication, availability of cans? What is going to be the plan?
Sure, so I know there have been conversations around special events, temporary containers. I can't speak to that as directly. As far as these agreements go, so on the commercial side, Groot will need to start, as required by the agreement, to start issuing communications to businesses that are affected. I know on our side, we will notify our existing haulers, our respondents to the RFP, who are also many of our existing haulers, and so on. And so we'll go through really, I would say, the village's responsibility there is more procedural. Groot will really have the menus of services at the start. There'll still be the Swalco USDA composting grant, and now that we have a commercial franchise, that work will start to expand into commercial businesses, especially restaurants. We'll really have a great opportunity as we're making this transition to kind of get that composting service in when the switch is happening instead of trying to retrofit it. So
Right.
That's an early opportunity, and then we'll continue through through our typical communication marketing efforts.
Yeah, I'm sure you're following us on Facebook. I mean, we've been pushing stuff out. I'm sure you're reading all of that, everybody here.
Right.
Very, very popular, but yeah, we're using the communication channels that we've typically been using, and I'm sure we can find other creative ways to show.
Ribfest.
Right.
It's coming
That's a
right
good
up.
point.
Right.
Where the heck are the recycling containers?
I mean,
You know what, you could put it on rain ponchos because it rains every time.
I mean,
I know, right?
I would like to.
Snowshoes, yeah.
I
I mean, there's just tons of opportunity for us to communicate a lot about who we are in those little, containers.
From a community standpoint, we're trying to make Lake Bluff a community of choice, a community where you want to be. And when I compare where we are here and I compare to other countries where recycling, or San Francisco, for example, where recycling is at 80%, or if I go and see my sister in France, if I put the wrong glass into the wrong container, if it is white glass, gray glass, or green glass, and she looks at me like she's going to kill me. I mean, we have a lot of ways to reach before we can be.
We're going to be the France of the North Shore. I'm just kidding.
Walt, is there a
I like
community
that.
we
I
should
like that.
emulate? I mean, is
But
there one
maybe-
that's doing this well, communicating?
But this is being a destination community. This is a community
Right.
where we think differently, and we already think differently, and this is one more element of it.
Block
Thank you.
parties, Blufinia, Ribfest.
There's, yes,
Lots of
even
opportunity.
neighborhood block parties, we could take advantage of the, right. There's plenty of chances where we could expand on our communication and our brand as a very waste
Environment.
management conscious community.
And,
Yes.
and as proven out by the food scrap program that was, was so important.
First of its kind.
First of its kind.
I think that begs a question then to Mr. Willis is, how did Highland Park get its commercial, its businesses to get to, what, did you say 70 or 80%?
I was gonna address your question, the same question, but basically, we held quarterly meetings, and we came up with, all right, where are we weak at? Show us the list of people that aren't recycling. Let's go after the big people with the 8 cubic yard, the bigger generators, and let's get some salespeople or get some interns. So we just kept going at it. And then we hit up around 70 and ran up. That seems to be, unless you mandate it, which you referenced, and I told Highland Park, why not? It's free. You're mandating someone to take a free service. How bad can that be for government
Right.
to do, right? But
Right.
it's still a mandate's a tough word for village boards, I understand. But that would be the final step you'd have to take and then enforce. But there's gonna be 20% on either side. 20%, you don't have to tell them they're gonna love it. 20% that probably will never do it.
Yeah.
It's
I
people in
just
the
think what Trustee Ryder was saying is true, and it could spill over into the commercial side in the sense of, as a community partner.
What we expect.
It's an expectation, but it's a desire. We're saying, we're asking you to partner with us to do this because retail's gonna have the baler for cardboard and somebody's gonna come pick that up. I think, what materials are we really talking about
Yeah.
when we're talking about commercial recycling? Knowing that the cardboard is picked up and baled normally, that's somebody else. And,
Yeah,
so what cannot be included?
anybody that's doing their own baling and going straight to market, they're not gonna be part of this.
Right, so they're gonna have a contract. I'm thinking of our
There's-
biggest commercial entities are already gonna have.
They
maybe
may,
net-
if you have
Yeah.
grocery stores, I'm sure they're bailing in the back. This
For
won't be
sure.
something that Groot takes over, but all your other businesses would be Groot's customers that don't have that type of already set relationship with direct to market pretty much. So there's a lot of opportunity to find out. And the nice thing is we'll have a complete list of all your businesses now. I guess you already do, but we'll have data on how many are participating. Josh is going to provide data on how many tons they're throwing to landfill, how much is being recycled. So we'll have good metrics on your business community, and then we can start to push on it to make it better. And just like on the food scrap, that's where we really want to hit it home on your residential. I'm excited about what Deerfield was able to do when they rolled theirs out. And I think we want to continue to use that USDA messaging and really make it a big deal here in Lake Bluff.
We have a unique opportunity where we have, I believe, 28 businesses in town, and I believe that the village will approach them for direct communication. So we might have a good chance to achieve that as well.
That'd be great.
I just had a quick question. It might be for Groot, sorry. So, when you're talking 80% of businesses are recycling, is that true recycling, or are you finding a lot of contaminants in the recycling? Because I know that there's like issues if people don't actually recycle correctly, and then there's contaminants in the recycling, and then that whole batch of recycling has to go to the landfill. So are we finding that people are actually adhering to what they're supposed to be doing, or do they have that recycle bin and random things get mixed in, and then it can't, we can't really recycle it? Because that would be an
Yeah.
education point too,
Right.
I guess.
Well, in regards to the 80%, which is Highland Park, I don't haul Highland Park,
Okay.
so I don't have specific data on Highland Park, but, I mean, the rule of thumb is I always have a certain level of contamination. Even the ones that try really hard, there's always a certain level of contamination. Retail can be difficult because, customers are in control of that partly or mostly. But, you know, I think on a rollout, what we've seen on the commercial franchises, it gives a little bit more of a cohesive message when it's coming from both the hauler and the resident, and the village, which kind of really even further drives that point home. So all the correspondence or brochures and information that we send out, you know, will go through Drew and staff and Glenn and everybody, and Walter, so we'll all be on the same page before that goes out. And to have, to Walter's point, the data on who is and isn't really helps, because we can kind of zero in on who we know isn't. We have a dedicated salesperson that focuses specifically on the commercial franchises. So that's another resource that we can utilize to go, you know, visit in person. So typically outside of a commercial franchise, we actually have a salesperson on the street earning business. In this scenario, it's all under one contract, but we still have someone to aid in those situations, try to maximize recycling. You know, sometimes we find a lot, they're throwing recyclables or glass or cardboard in, and if we can add recycling, especially with the free level of service, you know, those are somewhat easy sells. So hopefully we're hoping we can expand on that.
I'm pretty sure there is a provision in the contract that you get 5 warnings for contamination. And then after that, you're gonna start getting fined.
Okay, okay, so there's something.
There is some grace, there is some learning.
Okay,
You know, when the driver, a lot of your drivers will take pictures and say, this is what we saw. So,
And to speak further on that, I mean, we're gonna see that mostly on the back end and then follow it back through the route. You know, we don't have our driver getting out and checking every can. But what we see is if we start to see problems on the back end when we're dumping, we can follow that back to individual routes and start checking from there. But if we're having that problem, that's something that staff will all be aware of before we make those efforts to double check those.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the education is gonna be key, and I think the events could be a way, particularly on recycling, because people get confused what you can throw, what you can recycle, what you can't. There may be ways to set up a display at some of these events.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with big X's, you can't put this in the can, you can't put this, but I think the SEC might be willing to work on some ideas in terms of, you talk about the businesses. When we started out recycling residentially, it grew, right? And it grew and grew. I mean, we're way up there in terms of how the residents are doing with the recycling. But on the businesses, since we're tracking that, there may be a way to promote those businesses.
Yeah.
Publicly, there may be an award, maybe a sticker they can put in the window, or maybe, you know, promotion of who are the gold star recyclers in town, and the community is very invested in that.
Love it.
And they wanna go to businesses that support this.
The nice thing is, it's the same set of rules that you recycle in your home, same stuff you can recycle in the business. It doesn't change, it goes to the same recycling plant. So cardboard, glass, all the same things. If you learn it at home, take it to work, and have the same behavior.
Thank you. Any more questions from the board? Hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Brian?
Thank you.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, item number 16.
Can I just say something really quick, if you don't mind? I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the board for the consideration tonight, and on behalf of our drivers and staff. You know, we've had a long relationship with the village, and I think you know, this is just reflective of that, what I would call a successful partnership. So big thanks to Drew and his staff, and Glenn and Jake and Walter, so we really appreciate and look forward to continuing this relationship.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
More recycling.
I can say
We
that.
should actually be the ones saying thank you to Groot and the drivers who pick up our stuff.
Right.
Get a bumper sticker for you.
I would like to, as a resident, I would like to say that I'm pretty often on the road when, as a runner, and your drivers are always extremely courteous,
They
clean,
are.
Really
pick
consistent.
up if there's something falling out of a can, and always nice to the residents. So thank you
Yeah,
very much.
you're doing something right. They really, really are. Great.
I appreciate that. I will definitely pass that on, and we don't always get the kudos, you know? We hear about sometimes where we fall short. Hopefully, we always jump back and take care of it, but I really appreciate that. I'll definitely pass it on to the staff and drivers.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is item 16, trustee report. Do we have a report from trustees tonight? So next is our executive session, correct? Might I get a motion to go in closed sessions to discuss pending litigations?
So move.
Second?
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Marquis,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
This concludes the open part of the village board meeting. Thank you to anyone in attendance and have a great evening.
So we need to, I think we need to